Welcome back to Tech in Asia Conference 2021. We're so proud to be hosting over 4,500 participants in this 10th annual flagship event. We would be remiss not to thank JobStreet by Seek, East Ventures, Amplitude, AppsFlyer, Globalization Partners C, and our other sponsors for making this possible. We're powering into the second half of our second day with our main sponsor and a keynote speech called Scaling Regional Operations, Best Practices from PropertyGuru, Carousell, and Seek Asia. In this session, Louis Ng, COO of Seek Asia, will discuss what it takes to scale a regional operation. We're going to discuss the complexities involved in scaling tech firms, best practices to include in a playbook for regional expansion, pitfalls and challenges in market expansion across Southeast Asia, and we'll close with case studies from the experiences of PropertyGuru, Carousell, and Seek Asia. Please welcome Louis Ng.
Hello everyone, and thank you, Amanda, for the intro. First of all, I'm Louis. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Seek Asia. I'm super excited to be here today. I'd like to thank Maria, Amanda, and the Tech in Asia team for giving me this opportunity. I'll be talking about scaling regional operations and sharing some learnings that I've gathered from PropertyGuru, Carousell, and of course, currently from Seek Asia. I do have to confess that I can't say that I'm an expert in this area, but I have been fortunate enough to have a front row seat in these companies, which we have scaled across the region. Throughout the course of this presentation, I promise there's not going to be lots of words and graphs and anything heavy. I know it's after lunch. Instead, it's going to be a series of 6 images, which hopefully draw out some thinking and thoughts that help me share the reflections that I have when I've been scaling the operations in these markets. So without further ado, the first slide. So here's a picture of something that I'm sure resonates with many of you. Immediately, you can probably figure out what I'm trying to say here. It's a picture of peanut butter. And the idea is around spreading peanut butter too thinly. I think this picture probably doesn't do it justice. It's a little bit too thick. But the reason why I wanted to share this picture here with you is because as I reflected on my journey of scaling operations, one of the things that I had learned very early on is that going to different markets is such an investment that you have to properly think through in terms of the time, the effort, the facilities, the infrastructure, the monetary investments that you have to commit when you're going into a market. And I share this because using an experience at PropertyGuru specifically, it was one thing that if you ask the founders, one of the things that they learned was that expanding into markets too quickly is something that may be troublesome. In the instance of PropertyGuru, at the particular time where it became a challenge was when PropertyGuru was a strong player in Singapore, one market, and then decided to, over the course of a 12-month period, expand into 3 more markets, namely Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Now, the impact that had on the resource crunch and the exec time was quite severe, so severe in a way that we started to see the core business struggling because effectively you're using the same executive team looking at all of these new different markets that were new to everyone. So a very big, I guess, lesson learned upon reflection is that as you think about scaling your business into multiple markets, be a little bit more considered and really think through whether or not you're resourced and you're ready, and be real about what it actually takes to go into a new market. So that's something that's quite important. So that's the first picture that I wanted to share with you. The second picture. So this one, you'd be wondering what this is. You might say, hey, it's a guy jumping into the pool. More accurately, this is a picture of a BellyFlop. And for those who are curious, actually, BellyFlop competition, there's a world competition run by Red Bull. If you're interested, you can join. But the idea is jump into the pool, jump straight in, make the biggest splash possible. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is because although I just shared, when you think about regionalizing your operations, you have to be consider it and think it through, there is a point in that time where you have to make that decision. And when you've made a decision, then you've got to commit. You've just got to jump in and make the biggest splash possible. Ultimately, if you think about testing the market, making sure that there's product market fit, understanding as much as you can, figuring out what you need to do to be successful in the market, you have to make a decision that, okay, it is now time that we're going to commit. And then when you commit, you have to do it 100%, and you have to be behind that commitment, because if you don't, the chances of failure are really high. In fact, this is something that we're talking about a lot now at Seek Asia, as we've identified Indonesia as one of our core markets that we need to grow in. We're talking about things like, what are the infrastructure costs? Should we move to bigger and better offices? How do we attract the best talent? Should we even place our executives there? And how much time do our executives need to be there based in Indonesia? And all of this is around, okay, we've already said that we will be doing it. We've tested it. We've got all the knowledge that we have. And now we just really need to commit. So the idea and the reflection behind this is just understanding that if you've chosen and finally decided, you really do have to go all out and have your actions back that up and be behind that. So that's the purpose of this second picture. Now, the third picture, a pair of aces. So for those of you who play poker, you would understand that this is what you call pocket aces or bullets or pocket rockets. But effectively, in a game of poker, it's the strongest hand mathematically that you can have at any point in time, right? And the reason I wanted to share this with you is because in a game of poker, as an example, if you're holding a pocket aces, you know that that's the strongest hand at a particular point in time. If your opponent decides to push all their chips in and goes all in, the best possible decision that you can make at that particular point in time with that information is to call and go all in. Now, what you also need to understand is that you don't know what's going to happen. There are 5 more cards that are going to come out, and those 5 cards may be not to your advantage, and the end result of your decision may be that you lose everything and you've lost your hand. And I wanted to share this with you because after reflecting, going into a lot of different markets, one of the things that I found is that you have to be able to make decisions that are not with 100% information, but you need to also know that you have to make a decision with the information that you have and not be too paralyzed by the fear of the outcome of what is unknown. Because things are going to change. In the case of poker, luck plays a big part. In the case of business, competitors can come in. A lot of different things can happen. Just remember that you need to make fast decisions and make them with not full information, but the best decision with the information that you have on hand, and not be paralyzed by the potential consequences of a wrong decision. So that's something that I had learned in my journey that I thought was very important that I should share as well. Now, going on to the next picture. Now, this picture, I think, is quite self-explanatory. So if you've decided now to go into the region and you're trying to expand, one of the things that is critical is the people. And from my experience, I know that you need to over-invest and over-index and over-spend time on finding the best talent, because finding the best talent paves the way for your future success. And on the flip side of that, if you're unable to find the best talent and the right talent, it can actually set you back quite a bit. So going slow in this instance to find the right talent to go fast is something that's quite critical. You also need to understand that when you're building a operation regionally, you need to build a team of great talent. And it's been proven over and over again that if you are able to attract the best talent, they attract more great talent. So it just snowballs. So emphasizing and spending time to make sure that you're investing in finding great talent is something that's key and crucial as you're thinking about regional operations. I think this is the time where it's a great place to plug in JobStreet, JobsDB, which is part of the Seek family. If you are looking, last year we saw over 250,000 jobs posted on our platforms in software development, digital marketing, UI, UX, e-commerce, or tech roles. So if you are sourcing the best talent, please definitely be using us as well. So that's on talent, super important. Now the next slide. Now this one, same, but different. If you are already running regional operations and regional teams, you would have probably heard many times already that your local markets will tell you, hey, it works a little bit differently here in Indonesia. Actually, Thailand's a bit different. Hong Kong's different. Each market is a bit different. And that's something that you'd hear very often. And to a certain extent, that's very true. Each market is unique and they'll have their own nuances. But I think what's important and what I'm trying to share here is that although markets can be different, if you're running the same business, especially the same business model, there's a lot of things that are the same. So whilst you focus on the differences, it's also super important to focus on the similarities, because by focusing on the similarities and then focusing on writing up processes and aligning how you look at the business and how you run the business, it just reduces a lot of operational drag. You have to remember that a group of markets regionally is still a group, and to get efficiencies and share learnings, you have to operate as a group, and you also have to manage as a group. I think this is even more so for companies that are looking at expanding through M&A. So, for example, in PropertyGuru, their expansion was all through M&A. At Carousell, there was some M&A there as well. And a lot of focus was on PMI, post-merge integration, and making sure that we could run well as one group rather than individuals. So that's important. Look at the similarities, try to find that 80% that is the same, build processes to ensure that there's reduction in operational drag and you run effectively and efficiently. However, as I say this, you have to also focus on the but different piece. You do have to acknowledge that markets are different, and you need to spend about 20% of your time looking at what are those hyperlocal solutions that need to be tailored specific for each market in order to enable the best success for that particular market. So that's another reflection for me that was quite important and interesting. And the next slide, I guess, is quite self-explanatory, right? I really love this comic strip because it's quite straightforward. So, you know, some person on the left says our strategy will adapt as we watch markets evolve. After further communications and passing through different stakeholders, the message turns into our strategy is to adopt meerkats and watch them evolve. And clearly what this is saying, and what my point is as your regional operations start to grow, you have to think about and over-index on communications, because the more people you have in your organization, the more communication nodes there are, the more complexity there is. So you need to be a little bit more deliberate about how you communicate to your regional organization and not let that happen organically. So things that you should be looking out for are things like, you know, it doesn't make sense actually to hire someone dedicated to think about communication. So in Seek, for example, we've hired a head of communications and engagement to particularly fill this role. You have to start thinking about, you know, what are the different types of content that you want communicated? What are the different forums that they should be communicated in? Do those forums exist? And what channels do you have to actually share that as well? And also, what role does each player in the team have to make communications, for all the way from the executives to the leaders to the managers to the individual contributors? So this is important to ensure that you are running your organization in a way that is aligned and moving towards the same goal. At the same time, when you think about regional operations and communications, it's important that you're able to bring each market together, and you create forums that all markets come together so they feel like something that's bigger. So you don't necessarily want to separate your markets out individually and speak to them all individually when there are opportunities to bring them together. And one thing that I've found quite useful, and I've been able to implement actually in PropertyGuru Carousell and now at Seek Asia, is a whole rewards and recognition program. The idea is to really have a platform that celebrates people and recognizes people in a group so that they feel they are part of something larger. So in terms of the 6 key themes, those are the key areas that I wanted to share. So if I summarize for you before we go into Q&A, the first is when you're thinking about expanding regionally, you must make sure that you're deliberate and you're well considered as you expand. Don't spread yourself too thin. You need to make sure that you're well resourced and it's well considered. However, when you have made those considerations and you've decided that, yes, we do want to expand regionally, there comes a point in time where you must commit. You must do a belly flop and make the biggest splash you can possible. And as you've decided and you're in the new market, you're going to find that there's a lot of decisions you need to make. You're in a market that you're not familiar with. You need to make decisions that are not fully informed. You have to play the cards that you have. And in order to succeed, you need to make sure you over-index in finding the best talent, because great talent will save you a lot of headaches down the line, and great talent attract more great talent, which help you build a team. And finally, as your regional footprint grows, the size of your organization grows, you must make sure that you over-index and invest on communications to ensure that everyone is aligned and everyone is feeling inclusive and part of something that is bigger and greater. So those are the key learnings that or reflections that I had when I was thinking through my journey with Carousell, with PropertyGuru, and now with Seek as well. Hopefully that was practical and useful. Happy to answer any questions that anyone's got in the chat.
Hi, Lewis. We have a few that have come in. They're still trickling in from the audience. So I'm going to feed these to you in the order of your presentation, more or less. So one question was that you said that you must be able to commit to your ideas 100%. If you don't commit fully, your risk of flopping increases. But you must also be able to make decisions quickly. And this sounds a little bit counterintuitive, right? To commit to something that you have not spent too much time thinking about. So can you walk us through a little bit more of what you mean by committing to an idea? Like what really goes into the thought process that you commit to?
Yeah, no, thanks, Amanda. That's a really good question. And thank you to whoever asked that question. So I think, first of all, have to decouple these two statements, because in terms of commitment, my explanation is around deciding to enter into a market. So before you enter in the market, obviously you have to go through things like understand what the opportunity size is, understand the competitive landscape, check if your product has product market fit, make sure that you're well resourced and funded and you're able to enter that market successfully. But after you've done that sort of thinking, you do have to decide that, okay, we are going to go into this market. And when I say commitment, it means that you have to go into the market seriously. You're not going to be able to be successful after you've done all the testing that you've needed and you've decided to go in. You're not going to be successful if you, I don't know, spend half of the marketing budget that you would spend in your more mature markets, for example. So at that particular point in time, you have to commit to doing that. And you have to be almost bullish that it is going to happen because you've done the research and you think that's what should happen. However, as you are in the market, you do have to then be fluid in a way of, okay, we've committed to be in the market. Operationally, some things may be a bit different and you have to make some decisions along the way that change your course. I think that's fine. Your commitment to be in the market still stays the same and is still there. However, as you operate, you have to be nimble and flexible and make those decisions as you go along. especially in the space that we are all in the tech space. Like 3 months is almost like 3 years.
So almost like your poker picture, right? Maybe you don't have pocket aces, but you think you have a good hand, and not so neat as to have 5 cards coming your way, but to continuously adapt your interpretation of what that means.
Exactly, Amanda.
Understood. Thank you for taking that one. Our second question is, you mentioned that in all 3 of these companies, you've been able to implement something that is rewarding the talent in those companies, right? So you've put a great emphasis on the building of a strong team. A strong team attracts even more strong talent. And a great way to keep that strong talent happy is to implement something like a rewards program. So the question is, for those different types of companies where you've implemented this type of program, does the exact reward change, or is there some kind of common denominator when it comes to rewarding that works across different types of companies?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well, Amanda. I think there's a lot of different types of reward programs that you can run. I think what we need to remember is the spirit of, or the intention of creating a rewards program. So in instances where I have implemented these, the spirit was more around, the commercial and operations team driving the business to reward high achievement and recognize high achievement, and also to bring people together so that they understand that they are part of something bigger. Now, in the context of a more revenue-focused and business development-focused scenario, which is where I've implemented this, it's always been number one, rewards in terms of certificates, trophies, and just, bragging rights, if you like. That's one thing that always works and ladders up. The second, clearly, is remuneration. So spot awards, spot incentives to reward great behavior or great sales results. But all of these reward programs that I've implemented are ones that have been designed to last over the course of multiple years. And within a year to have a big, reward to look out for. So in this case, it would be sort of your reward trips, your President's Club, your high flyers, where everyone comes together as a group of elites to celebrate, success in an environment that's fun and very engaging.
Yeah, I see how this ties back together when you were saying, as your company grows and scales, the complexity of communication also grows. And it's great to have a forum that unites people so they know that they're part of something bigger and to get recognition in front of that bigger audience. We have time for, I think, maybe 2 more questions. But first up, when it comes to this bigger ecosystem, you pointed out that, of course, it's going to be a bit of a balance, right? There will be same, but different. And 80% is what you can focus on, but you must also focus on the 20%. So the question is, when you understand that your 80% works across the board and you're getting user feedback, and it's particularly about improvements they want to see around that 20%, what is a process that a business might be able to follow, or some kind of guidelines that you could maybe recommend for businesses understanding how that can help them localize and be stronger in different regions?
Yeah, I mean, that's really good feedback. Well, I would say like this area of standardization versus localization, operational efficiencies versus local effectiveness is always going to be an evolution, and it is always going to change depending on the stage you are at in a business. You might argue that as you enter a market, you want to make sure that there is a certain level of consistency in the way that you operate so that you can, just with the resources you have, manage many markets at the same time. As a market then evolves and matures, you might argue, hey, this business now in one market is becoming sufficiently big that you allow for more differentiation for them to, attack and fulfill the opportunity if it exists that way. But regardless of how the structure and how the processes and how the consistency versus the localization evolves, what is important is that there's a strong feedback loop. And generally speaking, there are forums that are created to talk about this and to raise this and to problem solve and troubleshoot this that are created. So, for example, in all of the organizations I've worked, there's always been MD forums where we have discussions with the MDs on a regular basis, and they flag, hey, this is working really well, but locally, we think we can be doing this better. We will put it on the table, and many times, actually, that idea that is relevant for one market, you have all the other markets saying, hey, that's relevant for me too. Then you have another opportunity to say, okay, let's make this something that's regional so that it works for everyone. In those odd cases where it doesn't work for anyone else and is very specific to one market, then it's a matter of sizing the opportunity and the complexity and then deciding or not, okay, whether it makes sense to be part of that 20% or if you want it to be 25%.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That was a really detailed answer. We have 60 seconds left, so I want to end on a hopefully funner one. But back to your slide where you had a man about to belly flop into a pool. This question is, have you ever come across somebody or yourself been in the position where you have had that flop? And what advice do you have for people trying to gain the conviction to try again?
Yeah, I think I don't think anyone or any business will be successful without having a flop or a failure of any of a magnitude, right? You just have to understand that flopping and failure is part of the process of learning and growing and improving. I think what's important is to instill a culture where failing is okay. Failing and doing it again and repeating the failure is not okay. Failing and learning and improving and iterating to be better is exactly what we should be doing all the time.
Then it becomes something you can learn from.
Exactly.
Can't stop just there. Okay. Unfortunately, for this conversation, we've just hit the time mark, and this is where we will end this conversation. Louis, thank you so much again for your time. Hope to catch up with you again sometime. Otherwise, for our audience, please stay around. We have a next session called Decoding the Cloud Kitchen Boom in Southeast Asia, just coming up in a minute. Thank you again, Louis.